Hi, I'm Gregory Pavlidis for Professorate.com, and today I'm going to be speaking about inflation, the invisible tax. Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, Albert Gallatin, 1802. Quote, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people, to whom it properly belongs." Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, Albert Gallatin, 1802. Truer words were never spoken. Thomas Jefferson's words were indeed quite prophetic. Even at a time when we as a country were still basing our monetary system on precious metals, and even when such an insidious machine as the Federal Reserve did not yet exist, Jefferson knew of the dangers that could manifest themselves in the years to come. The invisible tax, known as inflation, is one of the great stealth wealth transfer vehicles of our time. Arguably, it may be the greatest vehicle for wealth transfer the world has ever known. Yes, I know these are big statements, and with big statements and charges, one should have big evidence to support it, right? Well, I do. What would you say if you found out that within the first month of the passage of the first banker bailout, October 3rd, 2008, that the press reported $5 trillion had disappeared out of the United States Treasury? Well, they did, and it happened. Did you read about it? Don't worry, most people have not. Do you think $5 trillion is a lot of money? Well, by December, the total money that had gone missing had topped $8.5 trillion. Say missing and disappeared, but if you would like me to substitute the word stolen, I have no problem with that. What led to the near collapse of our financial system? What allowed for the mythical sums of money to disappear? Well, it all began when Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. By May 8th of 1914, the Federal Reserve was incorporated and was and is headed up by a private banking cartel. You see, the Federal Reserve is no more a part of the federal government than Federal Express. It merely uses the name as a front to lead the people to believe that it is part of the government. It is not, and it never has been. These statements are on record for verification in a congressional hearing. In 1933, 20 years after the Fed took over control of the U.S. monetary system, the United States of America was bankrupt. And by 1936, Social Security was instituted to cover the debt the U.S. borrowed from the Fed. And the taxpayers, we, have been paying for it ever since. From then on, the United States has been running under the emergency powers of the government. Even Greenspan said that the Federal Reserve Bank is not accountable to the President of the United States. It is not accountable to anyone. Are you starting to see where the problem began? Remember, where Jefferson spoke of the dangers of banking institutions? The function of the Federal Reserve Bank is to issue currency and credit. By doing so, they create inflation and deflation at will. The Federal Reserve Bank is controlled by unelected, unaccountable bankers, most of whom have not been through any Senate hearings, even as a formality. The Federal Reserve Chair sets policy in this country. When our great country had its monetary system based on precious metals, we did not have inflation, or at least it was negligible. We saw our first inflation when the Federal Reserve Bank printed currency to cover debt incurred by World War I. Then, the Federal Reserve Bank flattened it out during the 1920s, and they imploded the economy during the deflationary dip of the Great Depression, just like they have now. That way, they could go in and buy up smaller banks, insurance companies, and infrastructure, again, as they are doing right now. After the Great Depression, there was more inflation due to more deficit spending on World War II. Following World War II, there was again a big inflation, followed by a flat period in the mid-1950s. Later, and into the early 1960s, the Fed again increased currency supply to pay for Johnson's Vietnam expenses. Finally, feeling good about its power, but a little choked by still being backed by gold, the government, Nixon, took us off the gold standard and set us up with the Bretton Woods system of monetary management at the end of 1971. Then, by 1972 and 73, we had a huge stretch of tremendous inflation until 1982. In the 1990s, we had deregulation of the banks, which was the cherry on the ice cream sundae of complete monetary control. And lastly, the extraordinary inflation from 1982 to 2008, which through the help of the derivatives market led to the near collapse of our financial system, was again funded by the Federal Reserve's banks' increase in money supply, which not coincidentally parallels the inflation rate. As of February 2009, over $9,700 billion had been stolen, had disappeared, with access to unlimited fiat capital. They, the big banks, the Fed, can buy up other sectors around the world which are still not owned or controlled by them. Now, do you think any of this would have been possible, or at least to this extent, if we were still on a precious metals system? I think not. One thing is for sure, we the people of the United States of America need to take back our country. And if we don't go back to a gold standard, one way we may protect our money is to add gold to our investment options in order to prepare for what is yet to come. Yes, yet to come. As 78 million baby boomers are hitting the social system, with Medicare already bankrupt and in 5 times worse shape than Social Security, and over $1.4 trillion in option arm mortgages that have begun to reset, I can give you some great insight as to how to protect yourself from what is certain to come. Here are 2 fantastic ways to keep pace with inflation. The first one is to use an inflation-adjusted fixed annuity just like Congress does. Our own United States Congress retirement plan is an inflation-adjusted fixed annuity. Now, let me ask you, do you think that if these people who are making the laws and who are in bed with the Fed, do you think they would set up the best retirement plan for themselves or the worst? So why not mirror what they have? Why not? The only reason is if you buy into the hypocritical garbage they sell us, which again is investing in 401ks and the stock market. One smart way to offset inflation, the invisible tax, is to mirror the people who make the laws and control the markets and put your hard-earned money into an inflation-adjusted fixed annuity. These annuities are pegged to the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and you get more as the CPI rises. Yet you have a floor that it cannot go below, so your money is always protected. The other safe method to hedge against inflation is to ladder fixed annuities. That is, you put different amounts of money into different fixed annuities depending on your needs. Maybe some will go into an immediate annuity, some into a MIGA, i.e. multi-year guaranteed annuity, and/or some into a fixed indexed annuity with a guaranteed lifetime income rider, so that as you are living off of the income of one, the next is growing to a value that will provide more income than the first, and the last guarantees growth until your income can be based on a value close to or equal to the whole initial deposit. Of course, if you do the infinite banking technique and finance all your purchases through your own properly structured whole life contract, and you pay yourself the interest you would be paying banks, finance companies, etc., certainly those interest rates in a tax-favored environment will match or outpace inflation. Again, it is essential that you get a financial consultant who knows what she or he is talking about, modesty aside, like me, and then you will be able to sleep at night and live in peace and worry-free. We should all thank ProfessorIt.com for having the insight and the guts to get information like this out to you, the American people. This is Gregory Pavlidis for ProfessorIt.com. Thank you very much and have a great day.